This time, Haifa and Beersheba. There are more and more accurate hits by Iranian missiles on Israeli territory. This is very clear evidence of the speculation that has been circulating in the media for several days. Tel Aviv has a problem with its missile defense systems. We are here because we are very afraid of the missiles, because they are so powerful. This didn't happen before, but the situation is not good, because the missiles are very powerful. This is a problem. It's very difficult. That's why we come here to sleep. Israeli forces continued their airstrikes on Iran. Another Iranian security forces headquarters was reportedly destroyed in Tehran. Air Force planes struck selected sites related to Iran's nuclear program, targeting military missile production facilities and sites producing raw materials used in rocket engines. These targets represent the center of the Iranian Ministry of Defense's military industry. Iranian authorities denied reports of an alleged attempt to assassinate Iran's supreme leader, which appeared in the media overnight. Today, thousands of people took to the streets in most Iranian cities in anti-Israel and anti-American demonstrations. Until Israel and America are completely humiliated and brought to their knees, along with all their allies and supporters, we must move forward. The mood on the streets is far from what some commentators suggest, favorable to revolution and the overthrow of the regime. Unfortunately, similar sentiments prevail in diplomacy. Tehran has ruled out talks with Washington, D.C., and denied that it has requested negotiations. We are not seeking negotiations. It is the Americans who want talks. They have sent messages several times, very serious ones, but we have made it clear to them that as long as this aggression and invasion continues, there is absolutely no room for talks or diplomacy. The situation is slightly different in the context of talks with Europe. The Iranian foreign minister met with delegations from Germany, France, the United Kingdom, and the European Union in Geneva. However, it is difficult to predict whether the outcome of these talks will have any impact on the decisions of Tel Aviv or Washington, D.C.
We are entitled, tasked, and determined to defend our territorial integrity, national sovereignty, and security with all force. This is our inherent right.
Except that it is Iran that has been threatening the world with destruction for decades. Apart from its brutal domestic policy, it has become a major player in the international arena as part of the global axis of evil.
Absolument prioriser le retour.
We must give absolute priority to a return to substantive negotiations that cover the nuclear issue, the pursuit of uranium enrichment, the possession of ballistic missiles, and the restriction of funding for all terrorist groups destabilizing the region, which Iran has been pursuing for many years. Washington, D.C. has said in recent official statements that the decision on the participation of U.S. troops in an air offensive against Iran will be made by the White House within the next 2 weeks. According to analysts, the redeployment of air forces, the movement of U.S. units in the region, and the evacuation of diplomats from countries neighboring Iran clearly indicate preparations for U.S. intervention.
Kamil Trzaska, Republika.
The situation in Israel has not been this dangerous in a long time. Iranian rockets are falling on residential buildings, hospitals, and city streets. So far, 216 citizens of our country have been evacuated from Israel. However, there are still those who have not returned to Poland. The Polish Ministry of Foreign Affairs has decided to organize another transport for them. A decision has been made to organize one more additional flight. Currently, about 40 to 45 people have expressed their willingness to leave Israel by evacuation, and we hope that these people will be on board. It is difficult to say whether these numbers are final. If communication from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs has not improved, it is possible that there are more people willing to return. It's one big mess, chaos. On Friday, I contacted the embassy and was also registered in the Odysseus system. The information is contradictory, because first there was information about a commercial departure departure, which we would have to pay for. Then we received information that there would be no entry for the time being. Then that there would be some kind of departure, but no specific information, no organization, no emails about where to meet. Polish people had to wait several days for the first transports. Slovakia, among others, proved to be a more efficient organizer. Several of our compatriots returned on board other planes. You know about the group of Polish children with their guardians who flew in on a Slovak plane. As there are doubts about this matter, I would like to emphasize once again that these were children of diplomatic and administrative staff of the Polish mission. Some of the diplomatic staff from Tehran also returned to Poland. Along with the officials, there was also a group of Poles on board the plane who did not hide their surprise at the course of events.
Byliśmy troszkę rozczarowani.
We were a little disappointed. Hearing Minister Sikorski say that the state could afford the evacuation, we thought it would be free, but it was very expensive. We had to cover not only the cost of visas, but also tickets. We felt like second-class citizens. No wonder that the operation to rescue Poles quickly turned into an operation to rescue the image of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. But communication and clear messaging are not the Polish government's strong suit. This is a statement made yesterday by the ministry's spokesperson. The evacuation from Tehran has been completed, and this is from today. I would like to reiterate that we are not conducting an evacuation from Iran. We have enabled a group of people who wanted to feel safe to leave. They felt unsafe in Iran. Perhaps the head of the ministry could help clean up this mess. However, Radosław Sikorski did not intend to take on the responsibility of organizing an evacuation on the fly. The politician had other things on his mind recently.
Any comments about the turbulent situation in the world now?
When the Israeli-Iranian conflict escalated, Sikorski was not in the country. The head of the Polish Ministry of Foreign Affairs was on the list of 125 participants of a secret meeting of the global elite Bilderberg Group in Stockholm. The exact agenda and purpose of the meeting are shrouded in secrecy. However, the people Sikorski was photographed with give pause for thought. These photos show the head of Polish diplomacy sipping champagne in the company of Brian Schimpf, CEO of the American arms company Anduril, which hand-in-hand with the German Rheinmetall plans to conquer the European market. The American company Anduril and the German Rheinmetall have announced that they plan to jointly develop unmanned aerial vehicles for the European defense market. Anduril, whose CEO met with Sikorski, has specific plans for Poland. Interestingly, analysts point out that the entry of the American giant into our backyard could spell trouble for the Polish arms industry. Anduril, one of the most interesting military technology companies today, wants to enter the Polish military drone market with its own products. In the background is likely competition with Poland's largest drone manufacturer, WB Group, and big plans to break the oligopoly of arms companies in the US. Were possible contracts for the purchase of American equipment one of the topics of the meeting? We will never know. Certainly, judging by the photos, close relations with an influential Polish politician will not harm the businessman in implementing a plan that would spell trouble for the Polish WB Group. However, speculation is speculation. And one thing remains certain. At a time when hundreds of Polish people in Israel were counting on the support of the Polish Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Radosław Sikorski's thoughts were preoccupied with completely different matters. An electrical failure may have caused the crash of the Air India plane, with 242 people on board. These are the unofficial findings of investigators, based among other things on this recording. We are not talking about an electrical failure in both engines at the same time, which is unlikely and probably did not happen. We are talking about an electrical failure of the system that suddenly cut off the fuel supply to both engines. A few seconds after takeoff, the pilots lost control of the engines. The captain managed to send a message that the plane was not gaining altitude. A moment later, tragedy struck.
technical elements within the aircraft, but you have the environmental implications as well. What was happening in the environment? Wind speeds, was there any obstruction in terms of visibility? What exactly was happening in terms of airport movements of aircraft?
The answers to these questions, or at least some of them, are hidden in the black boxes. However, it will take some time to read the cockpit voice recordings and flight data because the devices are so badly damaged that Indian experts are unable to read them. The black boxes will be sent to a laboratory in Washington, D.C.
It records all the input that has been entered into the computer and the real-time input of the pilot as well. It includes the trajectory, the speed, the attitude, and so on. The other one is the cockpit voice recorder. So as the name suggests, it includes the conversations in the cockpit. It also includes the conversation with the air traffic controllers as well. Why it is so important? Because we then can identify whether there were any oral signals, warnings in the cockpit, and what conversations have taken place, what checklists and procedures they have done in the cockpit.
The flight from Ahmedabad, India to London took off on time and according to procedure in good weather. The pilots did not report any malfunctions or problems before takeoff, but a few seconds after the plane left the ground, tragedy struck. The Boeing 787 Dreamliner crashed into a medical school cafeteria. The disaster claimed nearly 280 lives.
Given an order to...
We have issued an order to check the entire Indian fleet of Boeing 787s, and we still have 34 such aircraft. We want to make sure that the aircraft are technically sound and ready to fly. And this is not at all certain, because shortly after the crash in Ahmedabad, another aircraft of this type belonging to Air India had to make an emergency return to Hong Kong Airport due to a technical fault. The airline has temporarily suspended long-haul flights, at least for the duration of the inspection of all aircraft. The safety of all flights worldwide is a priority.
Technology access, new engine technology, for example, new aerodynamic technology, new materials, lighter, more sustainable, new system configurations to prepare a next generation of aircraft, but that's still a while away. We would see that probably potentially in the second half of the next decade, but we are preparing the ground in terms of technology.
However, when a tragedy such as the one in India occurs, the families of the victims ask questions. What caused them to lose their loved ones in a fraction of a second? What or who was to blame? And could this disaster have been prevented? My wife died, and I was left alone with 3 children. They are still young, 12, 8, and 2 years old. I have to be strong because they need care. The families of the victims whose bodies have been identified say goodbye to their loved ones. Also present is the sole survivor of the crash, Vishwas Kumar Ramesh. He survived, but his brother, who was on the same plane, died along with the other passengers, crew members, and students from the medical school on which the plane crashed.
One, ignition, engine full power, and
it took off. In January 2024, the Axiom 3 mission took off toward the stars with a 1-day delay. Its successor, the Axiom 4 mission, has had more bad luck. Problems with the capsule, the rocket, bad weather, and now a leak on the International Space Station. Specifically, it is the Russian module Zvezda, meaning star. That is where the leak was detected a few days ago. Although it has already been sealed, NASA now needs more time to assess the condition of the repairs. Because of the space station's interconnected and interdependent systems, NASA wants to ensure the station is ready for additional crew members, and the agency is taking the time necessary to review data. Zvezda serves as a service module and provides basic living conditions for the station's crew. The module was launched 25 years ago. This is one of the oldest modules on the International Space Station, so it has the right to fail. Let's let the experts do their work. Assuming that this is only a technical problem, it will be solved sooner or later, and the Polish astronaut will find himself on the International Space Station. The Falcon 9 rocket and Dragon capsule remain on the launch pad at Cape Canaveral. The astronauts will remain in quarantine.
Of course, you're a little bit disappointed, but you understand that these decisions are not taken lightly, and they are taken for the benefit of the program, of course. So better to fly safe to make sure that the mission is a success, and the crew fully understands that.
The new launch date is to be announced early next week.
Tak naprawdę zaczęliśmy odliczać dni.
We started counting down when we began training with Axiom last August, and we can't wait for that final countdown, which will be 3, 2, 1, launch. However, postponing the mission launch date may have a negative impact on the experiments planned for the International Space Station. Since some of the experiments are biological in nature, and these samples are stored in containers, each of which has its own characteristics and its own guarantee of functionality. However, the safety of astronauts is a priority, and a small mistake can lead to a tragedy. Representatives of SpaceX have learned this the hard way. Meanwhile, at dawn on Thursday, the test launch of the Starship interplanetary rocket failed. In the future, the rocket is to be used to transport people to the Moon and Mars. Fortunately, there were no astronauts on board, and no one was hurt.